and we should be sent. Let me make sure. Let me refresh. Oh, we live, Ship. We live, baby. We live. We 7 minutes late, but y'all will be all right. Hey, everybody. It is your girl, Lauren Denise, host of This Too Shall Suck podcast, where we talk about the real of grief, the whole grief, and nothing but the grief. I'm super excited to have my boy on, GSU alum. Listen, funny story. I just, in my adult life, I found out his first name because I always called him Ship. That was his name. His name was Ship. So I was like, oh, I guess you do have a first name, right? I guess that's so I'm gonna read Ship's bio because he's too cool for school. And I want y'all to know I worked on the audio issues because I know last time y'all could not hear us both, but you're gonna hear me and Ship both at the same time for the first time because y'all ain't about to be out here calling me Teddy Riley. Okay, I got my sound together. So I'm gonna read this quick bio on Ship and then we're gonna get into it. And of course, if y'all have any questions, I am monitoring YouTube and Facebook. So just type them in the chat and let me know. So his name is J. Edward Shipp, and he is a first-generation lawyer. For years, he lived in rural South Georgia and witnessed the workings of the legal system and how it affected those most vulnerable. He is a graduate of Georgia State University's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies, where he majored in public policy with a concentration in public management and governance. After a stint as an entrepreneur, he enrolled at Mercer University School of Law, where he graduated as a member of the Order of the Barristers. Am I going to say that right? Barristers. On trial participant and coach, and a student member of the Boodle Inn of Court. He's worked as a law clerk in plaintiff's firm in Macon, Georgia, worked as a third-year prosecutor in the Macon judicial circuit, and was a staff attorney for a Superior Court judge in Holmes County. His experience is varied, but it allows him to look at all sides of a problem and figure out the best way to move forward to ensure a favorable outcome for his clients. So without further ado, my homie, Ship.
Appreciate you. Thank you for having me, Lauren. I appreciate this opportunity, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. I know it was super last minute. My style. But I appreciate you for just being on and being open because there's a lot going on right now. And typically when I do these, I talk about the last episode that I had. So my last episode 3, plug if you aren't listening. Episode 3 was about boundaries. So I think, they kind of tie in together, but I think it's really important to talk about what's going on currently and any questions that people have and any processes that they don't understand. Because like I shared with you, I don't know a lot about the system. What I do know is that it's broken. And so you, of course, being in the system could help kind of explain. I've seen you kind of do some lives and try and help people understand. So I'm, like I told you, I'm watching you, but I'm monitoring if anybody has any questions as well. So I think my first question is, we're so excited right now about, or I won't sound excited. I'm happy that they arrested the 4 cops that killed George Floyd. So if you can just kind of explain the process of where we go now, because I think we've seen this so many times that they get arrested and we're like, woo, yes, and then there's no conviction. So if you can just kind of explain the process for people to help them understand where do we go from here.
All right, so I'll apologize if you guys hear anything in the background. There's a guy like cutting grass outside of my house right now. So, I mean, other than me going out there and, jumping on him and catching a charge, I can't really stop him. So, anyway, what we have is these individuals have been granted a $1 million bail on all of their charges, which sounds like, oh gosh, how are they going to pay $1 million? But when you are in a, I guess you could say, police union, they usually raise this money for these individuals, and they only have to come up with like 10% of the money, most times anyway. So At the most, that will probably be about $400,000 for them to have to fundraise to come up with. And as a matter of fact, something that I just found out is that the bond is $750,000 if these individuals decide not to go back into law enforcement. So that's one thing. Minnesota is different from the state of Georgia in how they handle their cases. Noticeably, that both Minnesota and Georgia have a first appearance, and that's where you come in and you have, basically what is called a committal hearing, just to make sure that you have probable cause to be arrested. Then from there, where Minnesota kind of differs is they have something called an omnibus hearing in Minnesota, where if a defendant is not pled guilty to a felony or a gross misdemeanor offense, then that type of hearing must be held. And the main purpose of this hearing is to examine the evidence offered by the prosecution and the defense and determine the admissibility of the evidence that is given. So, following the rules of evidence, Minnesota, there might be things like statements that were made. I'm thinking about today's case in Ahmaud Arbery's case. It was hearsay, and there was an out-of-court statement that was made, and it was made to offer the truth of the matter asserted. But whatever, unless there is an exception for that hearsay to be brought in, then that evidence won't be able to be admitted. So that's one thing that differs in Minnesota. But after that, then you go into the criminal trial, and where we're going to have an issue, in my opinion, is that Minnesota has only had one police officer ever be convicted for murder, and that was the South Sudanese individual who accidentally killed I believe she was an Australian native. They ended up giving him 12 years. Other than that, they have never had a conviction. For those of you who are not well versed in American, I guess you could say, social studies, Minnesota isn't exactly a haven for Black people. So you might find it hard to find a jury that won't be sympathetic to police officers, because in America, there has been a thing of making police officers, or I guess you could say holding them to a standard of where they are like a golden standard of just virtue and whatnot. And it's hard to get those convictions. So that's where we're going to run into, I guess, an issue is when they actually do go to trial, when they go to these hearings, are we going to be able to find a jury that will actually not sympathize with them and look at the facts that we all saw in the video and make the determination that a murder was actually committed?
Right. No, that was good, because that was a lot that I didn't know anything about. So let's kind of dive into that jury selection, because let me knock on wood, I've never gotten summoned for jury duty, but I know that one of the questions they ask is, have you heard about this case? And who in the world has not heard about this George Floyd case? Like, who? People overseas, like everywhere. So how do you even go about doing a proper jury selection at this point?
When you get into voir dire, which is jury selection, and I apologize once again for looks like he's cutting the bushes now.
Look, now he's getting closer to the house.
Yeah. So, when you're doing voir dire jury selection, you are looking to find impartial jurors. Of course, with the publicity that has happened around this case, all 50 states have had protests in George Floyd's honor. There have been 18 countries throughout the world that have had protests for George Floyd's honor. I mean, it's going to be doggone near impossible to find a juror who has not heard about this case. Yeah. The thing that prosecution is going to have to try to do their best to do is to find jurors who are not sympathetic to the police. And that's going to be a hard thing to do. You're going to have to dive deep into questioning the jury. When you do voir dire jury selection, you usually have a panel of questions that you go through and you ask these different jurors, what are your biases? Have you ever experienced racial profiling? Do you believe in racial profiling? Questions like this to kind of weed out those who you know would not be sympathetic or those who would be sympathetic, depending on which side of the fence you're on. So there's going to be, I would say, a typical jury selection might take a day or half a day in just a typical, run of the mill case.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if it takes them to go through a panel of jurors, which could be up to 200 people, to narrow that down to 12 or 14 with the two alternates. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes them at least a week to get through that.
Oh wow, yeah, I believe that because again, who hasn't heard of it? Like you said, it's been everywhere. So, oh gosh, I was gonna piggyback off that, and I just completely blanked. Well, is this what happens in interviews? You just completely blank your question. Oh my goodness, it was so good too. Oh, it was good. Okay, all right. I'll go on to the next one. So I didn't get to watch all of the pre-trial. I think it was a pre-trial today for Ahmad, I believe, right? Get to watch all of that. But if you can kind of give us, for those of us who weren't able to see it, can kind of give us where we're at with that case, because I think this. I don't want to say that's what started it. Obviously, like us seeing George Floyd, this is what we're seeing now. But if you could just kind of give us an update on that case and what strides or not strides that we've made with that.
Okay, so what you had for Ahmaud Arbery's case is what is called a preliminary hearing. And in that hearing, the state and the defense present evidence. If the defense has any evidence, they don't have a burden to present any evidence. But the state usually presents the evidence that they have to show that there is probable cause to take this to the next level. As it was, they were in magistrate court, which is a lower court than superior court. And they have to have this preliminary hearing in order to what is called bind it over to superior court so that they can be tried for their crimes. Today was like, there were so many fireworks and so many examples of good lawyering. There were some examples of bad lawyering. There were some examples of Ronald McDonald lawyering. It's like, if you just wanted to like watch how it goes in real life, that was a beautiful thing to watch, even though considering the circumstances, it's one hell of a thing. The highlights of today mainly would be the fact that it came out in testimony that Travis McMichael, the son, he is an avowed racist. He actually, as Ahmaud Arbery was laying on the ground bleeding out after he had been shot 3 times by a 12-gauge shotgun, that he called him a effing N-word.
It's okay. You can say it. People need to understand where we're at in life.
Okay, so he called him a fucking nigger as he lay there bleeding out on the ground. Then, through bad lawyering, his attorney, this is Travis McMichael's attorney, asked, well, was there any other instances of Travis McMichael using this type of language? And the agent who was on the stand is like, well, actually, yes, there are multiple instances.
What did you ask?
So learn a lesson right there, kids. Never ask a question that you don't know the answer to as an attorney. Like, never do that. That's lawyering 101. Okay, so we find out that in Instagram and social media posts that Travis McMichael had made statements like, you should have blown that fucking nigger's head off, when there were posts like of black people, committing whatever, I don't know, whatever. He was a Coast Guard. He was in the Coast Guard. And he actually made the statement that I'm so glad that I'm on this boat because there aren't any niggas out here. So yeah, he's an avowed racist, and all that came out because his lawyer was terrible in asking these questions. So moving past that, we get to Roddy Bryan. Roddy Bryan was okay. Hold on, I'm trying to let this guy finish.
He's been closer to the house.
Yeah, because this is where we get to like Ronald McDonald lawyer. So Roddy Bryan, if anybody doesn't remember, Roddy Bryan is the individual who had the bowl cut that was like he said that his lawyer released a video thinking that it would exonerate him from being charged.
He was on recording, correct?
What's that?
He was on recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that should have been the flag right there. That should have been a red flag right there that, okay, maybe your lawyer isn't well versed enough to handle this. Kevin Go, whatever his name is, I don't know. He's UGA law, so I don't care about him. We Mercer law over here. So he made a fool of himself today. There were comments that came out about how Roddy Bryan was also a racist. He used racial language. There were things like, there were statements by Kevin Go, who is Roddy Bryan's lawyer, saying things like, well, this is just how it happens in the South, in regards to the language that was used. Saying things like, it's unfortunate. Bro.
He's like, did he get to the closer to the house on purpose? He's like, gotta get them edges right there. Get them edges.
So yeah, he's like saying things like, it's unfortunate that the language that was used, but this is just how it is in the South. He actually tried to stand up and forego the rules of evidence, and the judge had to tell him to, sit down. He tried to testify for his client. The judge had to remind him that you're not the one who's testifying, your client is. It was just a cluster today.
Sounds tacky.
Yeah, it was terrible. But the highlights are that this was premeditated in the way that they admitted that they didn't know Ahmaud Arbery. They had never seen him before. But Greg McMichael, who was the father, stated that he had a feeling in his gut, in his instinct, that Ahmaud Arbery was responsible for the thefts that had happened around the house. We found out that Ahmaud Arbery had been hit by the truck. That had never been released, that he had actually been hit by Roddy Bryan's truck when he was trying to escape from them trying to box him in. We actually found out that, Roddy Bryan just basically peeked out of his door and was like, y'all got him? And then he jumped in his truck and helped pursue Mr. Arbery. It was just, a lot of bombshells came down today. And I mean, at one point, I'm not even gonna lie, I was sitting out in my driveway, just sitting there listening to everything, especially listening to the final moments of Mr. Arbery, him trying to get away, him running back, him running forward, him going down a ditch, him trying to get away, and then finally just had no other choice but to fight or whatever, and finally getting shot and killed. And I shed some tears in my driveway. Like,
yeah,
that's a hell of a way to go, man.
Yeah. That's sad. Nobody deserves to go like that. I don't care who you are. Like, especially by the hands of some people who think they are the law.
Yeah, that was terrible.
Somebody said my sound is messed up. Do I sound like I'm underwater? Somebody said I sound like I'm underwater.
It could have been a blender outside. I'm sorry, yeah.
Somebody sounds like I sound. Oh, hold on. All right, can y'all hear me? Do I still sound like Ariel from Under the Sea? Do I sound like the Little Mermaid still? Because I don't know what that's about. Get it together. I'm good. All right. Let's see. All right, cool. I think I'm good now. Somebody did have a question. Okay, somebody had a question. Oh goodness. Okay, where to go? I think I had to put it in a new tab. All right, perfect. So the question was, Jay, could you please speak to what you know is going on with legislation on qualified immunity?
Okay, so as far as I know, there have been some bills that are trying to be introduced in the Georgia Senate House. Not sure which one, but either way, of course, we're in pandemic mode, so they haven't been able to reconvene. But there is still legislation that is trying to be introduced to get rid of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, for those who don't know, is what a lot of police officers are using to get away with these heinous acts and basically crimes against our brothers and sisters out there who are arrested or even lately protesting. A officer can claim that he has official or qualified immunity if he is saying that he's just doing his job and there is no malice involved. But a good lawyer who wanted to try and take this to the courts could argue that just like in criminal law, malice can be formed within an instant. So therefore, who is to say that these officers aren't getting pissed off when somebody is like, hey, you're wrongfully arresting me, challenging their authority, and deciding that they want to have malice toward this person and breaking their arm or kneeling down on their neck or, slamming them to the ground, breaking their jaw, whatever, what have you. Up until now, they have been able to get away with that unless it was just egregious. And that's when you get into federal law and 1983 claims and whatnot. But that's a whole nother subject. That's something that I'm not particularly well versed in. But I mean, that's where we are. Like, we really have to keep on our legislators and our representatives to push this qualified immunity rescission bill through.
Okay. And for those who don't know, do you mind kind of discussing what that is? Because I know some people might be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, so qualified immunity is defined as the immunity that is given to government officers, whether it be a politician, whether it be a police officer. It is immunity from prosecution, immunity from being held liable. This goes kind of hand in hand with sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity says that you cannot sue the state without the state giving you permission to sue them, which is crazy, but here we are. Yeah. That's why if you ever slip and fall at a school, hang it up. It's like, uh, you might can find a lawyer that can find like a loophole, but for the most part, nobody's going to take on that case because of sovereign immunity. Now, the qualified immunity aspect of it says that if an officer goes out, does something that doesn't show any malice, take, for example, the individuals who were arrested for pulling those two students out of the car. Say they hadn't been arrested. Say that we all watched that and we were just like, oh my gosh, they should sue this, that, and the third. They would have the shield of qualified immunity to say, hey, I was just doing my job. There was no malice involved whatsoever in this. It's just they were collateral damage and they would not be held liable. You would have to try and attack their liability on another level. And that's when you start getting into real esoteric knowledge that I can't go through in a day or let alone 15 minutes. So I'm trying to tell you, like, qualified immunity is what has messed up policing for a lot of people. It is a legal fiction. And when I say it's legal fiction, I'm saying that courts and judges have come up with this idea to kind of protect police officers, but it doesn't hold any weight. Like, the only weight it holds is that it's case law or it's something that a judge has come up with. Anybody with any common sense should know that if you do something wrong and you hurt somebody, then you should be held liable for that if you're negligent. But here we are with qualified immunity saying that no, you're not going to be held liable because these people have hard jobs and they can't think on the go like that. Well, why are you a police officer if you can't think under stress?
Simple concepts in life. I mean, is that not that needs to be on the application? Can't
Right,
like, how do you just like that? How do you handle situations under stress?
right, right.
They ask me that in my corporate job. Like they need to start asking police officers if they don't. Clearly,
But what's crazy is a lot of people will find out like police officers. It has been well documented that the psych exams they go through are more concerned with will this person blindly follow orders instead of using critical thinking. Because once you start really exploring some of the things that they tell you to do, like you wouldn't do it if somebody came up to you and said, "Hey, we're going to protest peacefully due to the death of somebody, one of your brethren, so to speak, putting their knee on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And we're not going to break anything. We're just going to protest." I'm pretty sure a lot of police officers, if they were critical thinkers like that, would say, "Hey, maybe I shouldn't take out my baton. Maybe I shouldn't be slashing these people's tires. Maybe I shouldn't be firing tear gas and rubber bullets at these people, even when rubber bullets are supposed to be fired at the ground." It's a lot of critical thinking that should go on in the minds of these officers, but the critical thinkers have been weeded out through the psych exams to make sure that you have a force that just goes with what the top brass says.
that's disturbing.
Yeah, quiet. Yeah, that's how you get to just stop them. So yeah, that's where we are.
That's disturbing. I'm disturbed. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm disturbed.
yeah.
Um, so someone said, and I believe this is to the point of the immunity which you were talking about. What can we, as average citizens, do on this issue? It seems like a rallying point for us.
It is a rallying point. I know a lot of people are asking for police reform, police defunding, what have you. And I believe that should be a rallying point. Not only should we defund the police, and when we say defund, we don't mean like completely dismantle the police, but what is the reason that a small town in Ashburn or in Georgia, i.e., Ashburn, has a basically a armored vehicle for what is the purpose of that? Like you don't need an armored vehicle to suppress insurrections in small town Ashburn, Georgia. You need to take away the military grade hardware. You need to attack qualified immunity, and we need to put pressure on our politicians to make this happen. There are police unions, the uh, Brotherhood of Police, the Georgia Fraternal Order of Sheriffs, or something like that, that actually lobby to be able to continue to have qualified immunity. But we need to make sure that we do the same amount of lobbying, the same amount of pressure on these politicians to let them know that, hey, these people are human. Like, they are no better than us, especially if these are the people who just blindly follow orders. You
Hmm.
don't want a force of people who would just do whatever is told, because that's how you get Nazis. That's how you get secret police. That's how you get KGB. That's how you get, just all types of G men who just go along with what is told. And when they have a budget that in some cases is over $1 billion, I'm looking at you, LAPD, then you have a force that doesn't have to worry about committing any crimes, doesn't have to worry about being held liable for the things that they do, and they get to play with army guns. Do you really want to go against that? We need to make sure that that is a rallying point.
That's good. I hope that answers your question. I wanted to circle back because I just remembered my question. Um,
Okay,
so let's talk about the charges, right? So you talked about, how the men got charged and their bail and everything. So the initial officer who got arrested, they moved his charge from third to second degree, if I'm
right.
not mistaken. And so if you can kind of talk about the charge. I know some people are like first degree, that's the one, but if you can just kind of share the difference between them and why maybe the first degree wouldn't stick or wouldn't work in this particular instance.
Alrighty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up first degree murder for Minnesota
Okay.
and give you an idea. All right. So murder in the first degree causes the death of a human being while committing, conspiring to commit, or attempting to commit a felony crime to further terrorism, and the death occurs under circumstances manifesting an extreme indifference in human life. So what I think the point of contention would be the further terrorism aspect. Um, it could be argued that they are conspiring to scare black people, but do you really think that a majority white jury in Minnesota is going to empathize with our plight, especially when the only police officer that has ever been convicted in Minnesota was South Sudanese? I mean, black. Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I applaud Keith Ellison for going for second degree murder along with third degree. So not only does he have the third degree murder charges, he also has the second degree murder charges. And second degree is whoever causes the death of a human being without intent to affect the death of any person while committing or attempting to commit a felony offense other than criminal sexual conduct. So, in that, you don't have to show that he had an intention to do this. We can argue as the court of public opinion that he had an intention to do it, that he knew him from the club that they both worked at. We can argue that all day, but it all boils down to what you can prove in the court of law. So if you don't have to prove an intention to show that this individual killed him or this individual uh, didn't worry about his whether or not this would kill him or whatnot, then second degree is basically the best charge that you can go along with. The manslaughter charges, those are also good. That's like negligent murder if we were to take it to Georgia. And that's when it's like, okay, you should have known, but you just had a wanton negligence of the things that you were doing. Anybody with any sense knows that if you kneel on somebody's neck for a long period of time, you are going to cause some type of bodily injury. So that's a good charge, in my opinion. I'm looking at it from both sides, not only, well, three sides actually. Not only as just an angry black man watching this unfold, but having worked on the prosecution side and working on the defense side now, it's like, okay, we want to make sure that we don't overcharge and end up with another situation like we did in Baltimore or the countless other cases in which people were overcharged and they didn't get convicted.
Mhm.
So we're trying to make it where it's just easily seen that, hey, this is basically it. Like, you got to be blind or willfully uh, obtuse to not want to convict on these charges. What we run into once again is that you may find a jury that is sympathetic to these officers and says, well, we don't want to mess their lives up, blase, blase, and they refuse to convict. But it cannot be said that the reason that they didn't convict was because they were overcharged. Like, nobody can come up with that whole storyline that, well, the charges were too severe for the crime that was committed. When you show that there was without intent and you still call this person death, that element of intent is thrown out the window.
I
That
knew as
element,
soon as I heard it, I was like, he about to nut up.
but nah, man, it's like when that element of intent is thrown out the window, then I mean, it's open and shut basically to me. Like, right there, all you have to do is say, okay, yeah, he did this. Let's convict. Let's move on. Let's hope we don't get a judge who gives him like 12 years probation or something like that.
That would be bad news. Oof.
Yeah,
Ooh, that would be so bad.
yeah, yeah. Oh, man.
I would be concerned.
I mean, even the second degree murder charge is no more than 40 years. And we know that we can never get George Floyd's life back. And once again, I am not versed in Minnesota law.
Mhm.
But if they were to stack the charges like they do in Georgia and just say, these years must be served consecutively, then he could easily look at 65 years total for the 40 years for second degree and 25 for third degree. However, third degree may merge into, or yeah, third degree murder may merge into second degree murder, so it could just be the 40 years.
Mhm.
But still, that, that's that's better than 12 years probation or
Right,
5 years probation.
right. But what's the likelihood that they would serve that amount of time?
It all depends on the judge. Who would have ever thought that the judge would come and hug the girl who killed both of them, Jean? So it all depends on the judge. And once again, I'm leaning and erring on the side of caution. I'm not entirely sure that they wouldn't get a, I won't say lenient sentence, but they would get a sentence that kind of reflects the attitudes of people in Minnesota. And for that reason, if they get more than 10 years, I will be greatly surprised, but I don't see them getting the whole 40. Terrible. Yeah, terrible.
Again,
Especially
not
the
surprised, but
what's that?
I said not surprising.
Yeah, the other three officers, I don't see them doing a whole lot of time. It just came out that they were just on the job, like what, less than a month or maybe less than a year. I can't remember if it was less. It was either 3 or 4 weeks or 3 or 4 months. But either way, their training officer was Darius Chauvin. So they were under his supervision, and I just don't see a judge throwing the book at them, even though they were entirely culpable, because they could have spoken up. One of the individuals looks like he might be a lighter skinned black guy.
Hmm.
And, you know, if you have removed yourself from humanity to that point, whereas a man is crying out for his mother who is 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", he's crying out for his mother, telling you he can't breathe. You don't know that his mother is dead. We know that now. But this man who didn't escalate the situation, who just told you, hey, I'm a big guy, claustrophobic, I don't want to get in the back of the cruiser. And you allow your supervisor to kneel on his neck without saying a thing, like you should be held fully culpable for that. But once again, the attitudes of individuals in Minnesota may show us that, well, yeah, we're upset about it, but we're not that upset. So I don't know. Let's give him 10 years and let him go on about his business. If they gave a person 12 years for accidentally shooting somebody after intense pressure, then I don't see them giving 15 years for an individual who didn't pull their firearm. So I'm hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
Story of our life, right?
Right.
Somebody made a good point. Somebody said, to Jay's point on building a jury, the last census, Black population in Minnesota was 5.2%.
5.2%. So let's do some math. 5.2%. So out of 12 people times 0.052. Wow.
Like, whoa. Whoa.
Oh man. Yeah, I guess that is
All right,
right.
we gotta be
Okay,
serious.
so
We gotta be
yeah,
serious.
so that's less than one person on a jury that would be black. So yeah, um, yeah. And the thing about juries, um, I know that Louisiana was at one point it would allow you to have like a split jury, but Louisiana is totally different anyway. Besides, they changed that. But Minnesota, if you have 11 people and one person is a holdout, then that's it. It's a mistrial. You got to retry it. And by then, is there going to be the intense scrutiny? They may elect to do a bench trial, which is just in front of a judge at that point. I mean, the system is so stacked against black people. When you really just take a critical look at everything, like it blows your mind. Wow, I never really thought about that. Like 5.2% of the population is black, and 5.2% of 12 is less than one. Yeah, wow, that's crazy, crazy. I had to do the math twice. Like, wait,
In your head, like, wait.
yeah. So it is. While I won't say it is probable, it
Mm-hmm.
is completely possible that they will get a all white jury. And it is completely possible that they may get a jury that sympathizes with them. I know that Minneapolis, in particular, has a strong um, Eritrean Somali population, so they may be able to get those individuals on the jury. But once again, even if it's 12 of them and one person who is like a holdout, that's still a mistrial. So, yeah, that's where we are.
I'm
Yeah, it's
gonna just
depressing when you really think about it.
right. I'm like, I'm gonna just look. My eyes started watering. What is wrong with me?
Right.
Crybaby?
Yeah, man. It is really depressing,
But
man.
you
Wow.
know what? Positive vibes. We're gonna
Yeah,
put positive vibes out there.
definitely, definitely.
People are wonderful human beings, and they saw that this man died for
Right,
no reason, and this man killed him. The four of them,
right,
senselessly. We're just gonna. That's positive vibes out there, y'all.
right.
Positive vibes. That's what I'm gonna hold on to that ship. So somebody had a question. What did she say? When would the trial actually take place? I know they have to do the jury selection and all of that prior.
Okay, so I don't know how it will work in Minnesota. It could be some months on down the line. It could be next year sometime before they get into it. I know here in Georgia we have a judicial emergency, so there aren't even any cases being tried in Georgia at all right now. You can't bring anybody into the courtroom to indict anybody because we're still dealing with the pandemic. So they don't want to bring any elderly individuals into the courtroom to impanel a grand jury, and that is holding up a lot of cases. So in the event that they have a similar situation in Minnesota, it could very well be next year or even 2022 before we see this trial happen.
Wow. Oh, that's
Yeah,
intense.
yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, to even think about it, I'm pretty sure that the defense that they buy and pay for is going to try and file all the motions that they can file to prolong this and to try and, you know, uh, stretch it out as long as they can because you're going to try and file those motions to suppress evidence. You're going to try and file those motions to suppress any statements that they may have made. You're going to try and file those motions to suppress any, I guess you could say, confessions that may be made. All types of motions are going to try to be filed. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if we don't get a trial date until the late part of 2021.
That just, you know what? That for me, that just hurts my heart because I think about the family, and
Yeah,
obviously, this podcast we talk about grief, and like to not be able to kind of have that peace, and to
right.
have to grieve for. I mean, and again, grief it's a weird thing, and it does this right, but like to have to publicly grieve, and then you're not allowing these people to get some peace about their dad, their son, their brother, their friend, their whatever, like that this justice system, which that's going to be my last question. I'm not going to dive into that right now because somebody has a question. So I'm going to ask their question first. Do you think it's legit that the U.S. Attorney General is going to see if he can get enough evidence to see if they can tag on a hate crime?
Do I think it's legit? I guess it depends on what you mean by legit. If do I think that it is something that he should do? Yeah, I think he should explore it. And I mean, don't be Glenn County PD. Don't just go through the run of the mill. Don't do an investigation. Just take the statements and be done with it. Turn over every rock, see what you actually have, see if Chauvin has multiple instances of using the word nigger or whatever, what have you. See if there was a racial motivation behind this crime. I don't think that there's a problem in checking that. In that, if you are able to find that there is a racial element to it and you are able to get a federal hate crime charge, then that allows you to get an even bigger jury pool for the federal trial. And that allows you to tack on federal charges so that they won't be able to walk if they get a sympathetic judge or a sympathetic jury. So, yeah, I think that it's legit in that manner.
I hope that answered your question. um, I don't see any more questions, so I won't take up all of your time because I have taken up enough of your time, which I appreciate you just again coming on. I know you were trying to travel out to the country, and I'm like, hi again. Would you like to come on the live? So this is the last call for questions, y'all, because we're not gonna keep up all of his time. Now the lawnmower man is gone. So
Yeah, like he's gone. Like I
right,
watched him get in his truck and drive off. I'm like, really, bro?
it's like you couldn't have done this earlier, or
Like, what do we have to do today?
Okay, I don't think anybody has any questions over here. I don't think anybody has any questions over here. Okay, perfect. So my last question, if you do have another question, let me know. I'm monitoring, but my last question is, God, we just have such a broken system. Like, what do we need to do, in your opinion? Because obviously, you work in it every day. What do we need to do to fix this system that is so broken and so um, not great for Black people?
You know, it's gonna sound radical, but it's a question that I've struggled with from, I mean, the day I got into law school, and I actually asked one of my professors about this, and she told me just in the plainest words, like, you got to burn it down and start over. Um, this whole legal system, um, because I honestly feel we don't have a justice system in America. We have a legal system
Mm,
that masquerades as a justice system. Um, it predicates itself on making sure that it holds a certain class of people, a certain group of people, i.e., black people, and to some extent, poorer white people. It holds them liable for far more than any rich white person could ever imagine. I mean, you have so many people who make millions of dollars through white collar crime, and they float under the radar. Like, it's not a big news story. And I understand that, blood and death sells. That's what sells to the news. But it begs the question of who are our masters when it comes to this legal system? If we got more black people into the legal system, then I believe that we could honestly make a conscientious effort to start rebuilding it as it should be. Black people are the people who are being disproportionately targeted by this legal system, whether it be in the enforcement of the laws or whether it be in the legislation that is written. Um, the war on drugs and the criminalization of marijuana and other substances, things of that nature, that came about because of black people. The whole Reefer Madness movie of 1930s or whatever, saying that Negroes would be made to talk to white women and all this, that, and the third. So when you start putting our voices and not just placeholders, but actual black people who have been through things, who have been through the system, when you start putting them into positions of power, whether it be judicial appointments, whether it be district attorney elections, whether it be ADA, assistant district attorney, magistrates, whatever. When you start putting those people into these positions, people who understand the people who are most likely going to be targeted by these laws, then you have a chance to start making change. But as long as you have older white gentlemen who have no ties to our community, who don't know what it is to have to sell weed to make sure that, you can buy your books for school, or, you have enough money to feed your kids or whatever, then you start seeing a racist application of the law. People always say that the law isn't racist, and we've outlawed racism through various things, through the voter rights, and all this, that, and the third. But what they fail to realize is that the name of the game has changed, but everything is pretty much the same. When you start getting into these abstract ideas and you start wording things different, you might say, okay, well, we can't outlaw people moving into certain neighborhoods, but let's make sure that they have to have, let's write in the laws that they have to have this amount of reserve to even get a loan for a house. And we
Mm-hmm.
all know that black people don't have that type of wealth and that type of money to have those reserves. So, yeah, on the face of it, you're saying, okay, the law isn't racist. There's nothing we can do about it. But the intent of it and the way it's written shows that it is meant to have a racist application. You may
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, well, the law doesn't say that. Prime example: the law doesn't say that if you have crack versus cocaine, that's not a racist thing. That's just because crack is more dangerous. Well, who's to say that? Where does it say that crack is more dangerous than cocaine? But we do know that there is a certain demographic who is more apt to use powder cocaine than crack cocaine or freebase cocaine. So, yeah, the way the laws are written, the way the laws are interpreted, the way the laws are applied means that we have to get in. We as black people have to get in these positions to make sure that these laws are not written in a racist way, that these laws are not enforced in a racist way, that these laws are not interpreted in a racist way. If you read some of the case law that we've had to read, I mean, it blows your mind how things like a Terry stop and frisk, things like that were interpreted in racist ways. And that allows police officers to just walk up and just basically pat you down if they feel like you are committing a crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you're not going to have to worry about that in the suburbs of Forsyth County or anything like that. It's the people living in zone one of Atlanta who have to worry about things like that. And I'm sorry I'm going on a tangent, but I'm
No,
passionate
no, you're fine. You're telling
about
no. I,
it's
I was.
like, okay, even in Atlanta, there's a strong black police force. But when the whole system is built upon racism, then it doesn't matter. There were black overseers when slavery was going on. So you can't tell me that just because you have black overseers, oh, the master wasn't racist because he put somebody black on there. Nah, you can't tell me that. The whole system is racist. The whole system is flawed. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's where the spotlight has come now. Like people are seeing, oh snap, the system is flawed. And it took, the death of George Floyd to spark that. But I mean, these lynchings, these 21st century lynchings have been going on for years. And it's gotten to a point where it's like, oh crap, like, where have we gone? Had we had like anybody else in office, then, and when I say in office, like in presidential office, if we didn't have a fool in presidential office, then I'm pretty sure people would, protest for a day or two and then go on. But when you see how dangerous it can be in the wrong hand, then you start putting that spotlight on it and saying, okay, nah, this isn't how it's supposed to go. This isn't how it was meant to be. And I think that's why a lot of people are realizing now that we have to put those people in color that are willing to change the status quo instead of just enforce it for their own good.
So good. Look. Whoa, Ship. Y'all don't know. Like Ship, I'm so proud of him. I keep calling him Ship. I'm never gonna call him his first name because I
It's all
called him his
good,
first name
man.
like a year ago. Hey,
It's all good.
I'm gonna go to college Ship 2006,
Yeah,
2010,
2006, 2010,
and he's
man.
still Ship. He always gonna be Ship.
That's it. That's it.
Ship, excuse me, Jay
That's
Shipp Esquire. I appreciate you coming on. I know I'm just looking at like all the comments. I know so many people got so much, and you helped not only me but so many other people. Because again, we just don't know. But I think to your point, anyone who's listening, make sure if you vote, like we got to vote people in. Do your research. My friend Sydney, if you're still on, Sydney, tell me the website to look at. There's a website that you can go and pull up sample ballots where you can learn about your candidates and get those people in there who are going to help make those changes. Because right now, it's kind of all we got. Like, we have to get those people in there to make those changes. So I know in Georgia, we vote on Tuesday, June 9th. Yep. I'm actually going to vote tomorrow because,
Yeah.
whew,
Yeah.
listen, I am an avid weirdo of coronavirus and I don't need nobody close to me. So I have to go early.
Uh,
Okay. I have to go early. Y'all got to stay away from me. I got to wear my mask, Lysol. I'm that person. So yeah, y'all definitely go vote wherever you're watching. If you have not listened to my podcast, looking at y'all. Episode 3 out. It talks all about boundaries, and I think it's important now, especially to have boundaries, especially with social media and everything that's going on in conversation. So go ahead and listen to that. I'm super excited about the episode next week. I'm gonna have several guests. And we're going to be talking about the Black experience in America and why um, Black is the new grief. And I have so many different varieties of people, and we're just going to talk. So I'm super excited. So tune in for that next week. Ship, again, for everything you're doing. If anybody has any more questions or anything, where can they contact you? Where can they find you? All that.
let's see. On Instagram, my tag is attorneyship. It's right there at the bottom. On let's see, Twitter, Ship ESQ for Ship Esquire. On Facebook, Jay Shipp. There's a picture of me and my daughter. So, well, my youngest daughter. So yeah, I'm easy to find. I'm always talking. I think the website you're talking about is vote411.org. I think that's it.
I think it's like, oh, she told me. Oh gosh, she's gonna get so mad when she sees this. She's gonna be like,
Oh,
girl.
but just reach out to me, email me, jship@jshiplaw.com. Just, I'm easy to find, man.
He's open. Listen, shit been open. I met him in
Yeah.
2006. But thank you all on YouTube and Facebook for watching. I love y'all so much. And I will see you guys next week for TTSS Thursdays.